Hey, good evening, everyone, and thank you for taking time out of your day to come and listen. And I've never done this before, but I thought I would do like a chat session where you guys can ask questions. I have a bunch of things that I want to talk about too, but feel free to type a little message in there if you have a question. I can't answer like specific health questions like should I take this thing or do that thing, but more general things that you've just been wondering about. And I find that I spend a lot of my time during patient consultations just answering general questions. And I thought, well, why not just do it in a group? And for what it's worth, all the things that I think about and kind of struggle with in my own practice to figure out for people. And then I also want to show you, if you're open to it, some more general functional medicine ideas, so you understand like how treatments should go. And I find nowadays with so many new doctors coming into functional medicine that it's the veteran old timers like me. It's not a bad thing to hear from us once in a while and see the perspective, because the profession is growing and changing, understandably, in a really good way, I think, overall. But just want to make sure that we maintain the history and the origins of what the original doctors had in mind as they were setting this up. And we're going through it. I would just call it like a literal explosion in functional medicine right now. You know, it's like literally every month it's getting more and more intense, and we see it in a variety of different ways. So I'm going to start off by talking about a couple of sort of big picture questions, and then we'll get to your stuff that you guys send in. Okay, so um, I think the biggest picture question is like, and it's so silly that we even have to talk about this, is like, what am I actually supposed to eat? Is paleo right? Is vegan right? Is plant-based? Is it Ornishes or Pritikin's or Schwarzbein or who's really got this figured out? Um, and It's just such a hard question, and I've been thinking about this since I was 16 years old. You think I'd have a really definitive answer, but I think the best answer is it depends, and depends on where you're at and what you want to do with your health and where your health is at now. And so the key components that I see, and the current trend is definitely heading towards whole foods, plant-based, which is what we used to call vegetarian diet when I was in college, whenever that was, like 35 years ago or whenever that was in the dark ages. And I think if you understand the properties of meat and animal fat and what they do to your body, for the good and for the bad, then you can start to get a perspective on, do you want to go on the paleo train or the whole foods plant-based train, and realize that this is a moving target. And I think that's one of the most difficult things to understand. I don't really have a slide on this, so I'm just have this other slide up here. We can here put up like I don't know, some random slide. I don't really have a slide on the food. Oh, that's a good one. We can just put that one up and talk about toxins. Speaking of meat, so you know, um, in in the way that I was trained in functional medicine in the early 1990s, and this you got to realize goes back to my teachers who were doing this work like in the 70s. So we're going back all the way to the 1970s. In the chronic illness community, the doctors that treat people who are chronically ill, um, what was found was, oh, I know, I got a better image I want to put up. Here we go. This would be a perfect image. In the chronic illness community of doctors, which is how I was raised, naturopaths, chiropractors, acupuncturists, a few medical doctors in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, but not so many. What was really on the table was, how are we going to work with chronically ill patients who are extremely sick? And I think what was discovered early on in that era was that grains are really difficult for some people to eat. Gluten could be, the cause of a lot of the illness in this chronically ill crowd, and that because you're taking out grains and taking out gluten-containing grains, especially, um, some of these people even have a limit to the kinds and vegetables they can eat. Fruit makes them sick. You're really kind of stuck using animal protein and animal fat as a heavy portion of the diet. And I think from a physiological standpoint, what we're thinking about with these folks is that you need animal fat and animal protein for cellular repair to a certain extent. Or I shouldn't say it that way. You need protein for cellular repair. And if you've got a lot of damage, you may need more protein than you can get from from plants only. At least that was the theory, I think, in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s. And so, in fact, the way I was trained is that we were told to convince people to, give up vegetarianism if they were vegetarian, to actually, correct that, because that was a problem. Almost like, if someone has, a certain religious orientation, you want to change them away from that or something. It was almost a little strange when I look back on it now. But I think the problem that those doctors ran into, and this is going all the way up to the present day now, is that some people just have to eat meat. They have to eat animal protein in order to function, because so many otherwise healthy foods are off the table. And so, because functional medicine was developed by doctors treating chronically ill patients, my whole profession has a bias towards meat and animal fat as being essential. And you got to understand that every doctor is created, their knowledge base is created by the kinds of patients that they work with. So you can get really distorted in your view of the overall world if you're working with a certain patient population. And it's very hard for doctors to kind of see outside the patients that they're working with. If you're working with all diabetics, you're going to see the world from the perspective of diabetics, et cetera. And so the current era that I see now, and I see this all across the board, from restaurants being built to the younger generation of people in their 20s and 30s and how they're choosing to eat, to the popular press, to all the hip, cool workshops. I'm in Northern California and the Western United States, spend my time here, and everything's kind of moving towards a vegan, whole foods, plant-based diet. And I think what you see with people who adopt those kinds of diets, if they can tolerate grains and beans and they can digest them easily and digest them well, is you have a really wonderful and robust improvement of the microbiome, and all the bacteria and organisms in your gut respond beautifully to eating beans and fruits and vegetables. And the microbiome is sort of neutral in general, to animal protein and animal fat. And so in the non-chronically ill patient base out there who do not have this catastrophic immune failure and horrible chronic GI problems, they might just have, for example, cardiovascular disease, or maybe someone just is recovering from a stroke, or someone has diabetes, which is a chronic illness, but they're not in this extreme level of environmental sensitivity and heavy metal toxicity. They just have diabetes and that's it. Or again, some just have cardiovascular disease and that's it. Or maybe have some chronic digestive problems, but they're not super severe. They're not riddled with all kinds of parasites. Those folks respond beautifully to whole foods, plant-based diets, with no animal protein and no animal fat, and a very limited amount of fat at all. And so there's this huge spectrum. And I think, one of the things I'm trying to do now as a practitioner is understand where the patient's coming from, what's the diet that they need to be on now, and then what's the diet that we want to move them towards over time. And what I see for sure, the healthier that people get overall, the less animal protein and animal fat they need to stay healthy. Okay? And so it's a moving target, and it can change. You can be reliant upon animal protein for a long period of time, get healthy, and then be able to move to more of a whole foods, plant-based diet. And so I don't have a strong sort of fixed philosophy on this, other than I try to figure out what's going to help the patient the most, and that I do see as people get healthier and healthier, they can move to more of a whole foods, plant-based diet. And when we see the features of these various diets, the problem is that the human brain always kind of latches on to one aspect of the diet. And so with paleo, people clearly latch on to the whole meat type thing, and that you can just eat as much meat as you want because it's paleo, right? And then that can get overdone really easily. If you're striving towards whole foods, plant-based, and you obsess and overeat vegetables and fruit and beans, actually that doesn't really happen. People don't really overeat vegetables, fruit, and beans. You can't really. I mean, if you sit down and you're eating a plate of kidney beans, are you really going to overeat kidney beans? No, it's just disgusting. You wouldn't do it. Are you going to really eat too much broccoli? That's not going to happen. So I think part of the thing with whole foods, plant-based, is it steers people towards the healthier foods as a primary portion of their diet. And then when they cheat, they go out and they have, like, I don't know, cheese, a burger or something, a hamburger, or they have a steak, or they have some fish. And so, the cheating that you do on a whole foods, plant-based diet, if it's going over to animal protein, is not going to be nearly as destructive as the usual cheating that we do, which is the whole chocolate cake, box of cookies, let's eat a whole pizza kind of thing. So I think some kind of modified whole foods plant-based diet where your cheat days, if you want to have them, include eating meat. The doctors that I work with now estimate, assuming that you're healthy and otherwise in good shape, around 10% of your total calories coming from animal proteins, probably going to be about right. If you're not healthy, you may need to have a majority of your calories coming from animal protein. We have patients in my clinic who can't eat beans, can't eat any of the grains, whether they have gluten or not. They can't eat any fruit. Piece of fruit, bite of fruit makes them sick. And, 3/4 of the vegetables they're unable to eat also. So there's not a whole lot left with that kind of person, other than, focusing on animal protein, okay? So now, let me see here. I think my audio is okay, right? Yeah. So if the audio is garbled, it's probably your internet connection is my guess. So let me go on. I'm going to handle a few other things, and I'll start to look at questions, okay? So you guys can keep asking questions if you want. Encourage that. The next thing I want to talk about a little bit is what's too much or too little exercise, because that's another thing. We see some people who get into most common thing obviously is not enough exercise. Other people that just over exercise. And so, I've always been kind of a strong advocate of physical fitness. I ride my bike a lot. I run a lot. I've done more hours of yoga than I could count, thousands of hours of yoga. I like to stretch. I do free weights and strength exercises a couple times a week. And so I think with the exercise question, the more physically fit that people become, especially the more lean muscle mass that you have on your frame, the healthier you're going to be. And so if I can take a patient and put 5 or 10 pounds of lean muscle on them, I know their health is just going to improve and skyrocket. Now, how does that happen? It happens through working out, through a variety of ways, whether you're doing high intensity workouts, or it has to involve something that's, resistance exercise. So it's got to somehow involve weights or some kind of strength and resistance type of exercise. But you don't have to do it very much. So my workouts right now that I'm pretty happy with are, and I'm 54 years old, so you got to take that into account. I'm not like 20 anymore. I'm not like riding my bike for 5 hours across the countryside every day like I used to. So, in my age group, I'm doing, strength training with kettlebells, very, very hard, high intensity workouts. I do 2 workouts a week. Sometimes I do 3, but not very often, and they're about 12 minutes long. And I'm telling you, if you're doing a kettlebell high intensity workout, it's about all you can handle anyways. 12 minutes is plenty. And then I ride my bike almost every day for 45 minutes to an hour, maybe an hour and a half on a long ride day. I do yoga and stretching pretty much 100% of the time in the mornings. And then I do sort of freestanding strength training exercises pretty much 100% of the time too. That would be like lunges and squats and push-ups and sit-ups. I do those pretty much every morning. And then I run a couple times a week, once or twice a week for around 40 minutes. So strength training, cardio, and then the combination of stretching and sort of static strengthening exercises without weights. That's kind of how I'm keeping myself in shape. And my muscle mass is probably a little bit less than it was 10 or 20 years ago, but it's not bad. I can't lift quite as much weight as I used to be able to. I used to be able to deadlift, I don't know, 150 pounds pretty easily. Now maybe I can do 100, but it's enough. Again, for my age, I think it's an appropriate amount of strength and whatnot. Next question, and these are questions that have come in frequently, so I want to cover them. And then we'll get to your questions in a minute. What was the other one? Here it goes. The purpose of meditation. People ask me this one all the time. Patients always ask this one. And then we'll talk a little bit about sleep. And then a little bit about supplements, and we'll open it up for your questions. So, I had this revelation. So I spent a couple of years of my life in monasteries in Asia when I was a young man. When I was 18 years old, I lived in a monastery in Japan, in a Zen monastery in Japan that was very, very strict. And when I was 23 years old, I went back to Asia for a couple years, and I lived in a Thai monastery in southern Thailand most of the time. I spent a little bit of time in northern Thailand, and I spent 3-4 months in a monastery in Nepal as well during that trip. So it was a total of around 2 years. Then with Japan, it was maybe 2.5 years total time in monasteries. So, I thought I knew a lot about meditation, and it wasn't until 25 years later that I realized what was actually going on, which is that when you're working with an enlightened Buddhist master, as I did, and they're meditating all the time, they're not meditating to de-stress or relax. They're meditating because when you're enlightened, that's just what you do. You just sit around and you breathe. So in other words, I was thinking that meditation was a tool to get somewhere. And the reality was that it's more like, okay, when you get to that point, when you get to that spiritual connected point, you end up meditating. You can't get spiritually connected by meditating. It works the other way around. How funny is that? It's kind of ironic. And so, again, I meditate every day, and I meditate, however you want to call it. I try to do my spiritual practices every day, usually for around 2 hours. On a good day, if it's a weekend and no one's around, it'd be more like 3 or 4 hours. Last night, I probably got in about 4 hours, 5 hours. Last night, this morning, however you want to say it, I was up around 4 in the morning, and I practiced all the way until about 8. So I got about 4 hours in last night and this morning. And I'm very committed to it. I think it's one of the main tools that we can use to heal. It's not the easiest thing to pull off, but I encourage you guys who are interested in it to at least take a class or start to explore ideas around meditation. The practice I'm doing right now is a Taoist meditation practice, which I relate to the most out of all the different things that I've studied, and it's really become a centerpiece of my life in a lot of different ways. Okay, so purpose of meditation, it's not really, to relax and to shut your mind off and to de-stress. The purpose of meditation is to get in touch with your spiritual self. And so meditation can mean anything from golfing to gardening to spending time with your kids to painting the room in your house to make the room look better. So in my world now, meditation isn't like you're sitting there and trying to turn your brain off. Meditation is more about what can you do that gets you more spiritually connected, whatever that may be. And I mean, I'm thinking about one of my more spiritually connected patients. She doesn't ever meditate, pray, or do anything religious. She just gardens. That's her way of being connected, is to be in nature and with nature. And boy, it's working for her really well, And so there's a variety of different ways you can do that. And you can use meditation, quote unquote, as like a relaxation technique, but that's more like a psychological rebalancing technique. And that's not the point of what I learned in the monasteries in Thailand and in Japan. The point was that it's a spiritual practice. It's not a psychological de-stressing technique. And so I really want to encourage the people that I work with to pursue their spiritual life. And whether that involves meditation in some way or not, that's fine. But to look at meditation from a deeper angle than just as a stress reduction way to go. Okay. Um, Let me see here. One last one. Oh, sleeping patterns. Now, this is really interesting. So, for so many years, I thought, okay, you go to bed around 9 or 10, you wake up around 5 or 6, you get your 7 or 8 hours of sleep, and everything is really great. But as I start to look into sleep cycles more recently, and I'm doing this now with my sleep cycles quite a bit, I'll often go to sleep around 7 or 8 at night and get 4 to 6 hours of sleep and then be up for 2 or 3 hours and then have a few more hours of sleep and then wake up kind of officially around 4 or 5 or 6 in the morning. And I thought this was kind of strange. I had fallen into this weird sleep pattern. I started to research it, and actually, in the good old days, a lot of people slept like this pre-electricity. A lot of people would just go to bed when it was dark. And this time of year, I don't know, it's maybe around 7. Sleep. You can't sleep from 7 until 7, right? You can't sleep for 12 hours. Nobody can do that unless you're really exhausted or something. But sleep for 4, 5, 6 hours. Wake up around midnight, 1 or 2, have a few hours of awake time, and then boom, sleep another few hours, and then wake up again. So that split sleep cycle, which seemed to me to be dysfunctional for some people, depending on your lifestyle and whatnot, can actually be really a fine thing. Now, I have all kinds of odd sleep patterns now. Sometimes I will sleep for 12 hours, sometimes I'll sleep for 4. But it's very interesting to me when I'm really in the right rhythm, I'll usually get around 4 hours of sleep, be up for an hour or two, and then get another 3 or 4, and then boom. It's 4 in the morning and I'm in good shape. Now, admittedly, going to bed at 7 or 8 at night is not possible for most human beings. My son is in college right now, and I'm single right now. I don't have a relationship, so I can go to bed whenever the heck I want. And if it's 7 and I want to go to sleep, I just do it, and there's no one to complain about, and I don't have to cook dinner for my kid or whatever, So I have this luxury right now, really, that's just in the last year, of being able to control my own sleep cycles again, like I was when I was younger. When I was in the monasteries, I had a really unusual sleep cycle too. I would always wake up at 2 in the morning. So I go to sleep around 9, get about 5 hours, and wake up at 2. I'd always want to be the first one at the meditation hall. So I get to the meditation hall around 3 before everyone, all the lazy people would get there around 4 in the morning. And so I did that, but again, I was in my 20s. I was a little, you know, younger and a little more spry in those days. I could get by on 5 hours of sleep as long as I meditated for 10 or 12 hours. That all kind of worked out really well. Okay, and then the last question here before we open it up to your questions is, what are the basic essential supplements everyone should take? So this is predicated on people eating properly. Wherever you are on that spectrum between paleo and plant-based, and wherever you need to be, for where you're at with your diet and your stress levels, now and what you've done in the past. But in general, I think there's some key things that it's pretty much impossible to get enough of. I can actually circle it on here because it's on here. Now, we're assuming you're not horribly stressed, but one thing that I think we're incapable of doing these days is getting enough detoxification support, because there's so many environmental toxins. You could eat broccoli all day long, it's just not going to work. So you need to, if not every day, at least sporadically take something that's going to help your liver out. Just common sense. The other thing is that unless you eat perfectly like a saint every single meal, decade after decade, you're going to have some level of a little bit of damage to the gut lining, some kind of inflammation in your gut, and you should do something kind for your gut on a pretty regular basis. The best way to do that is with probiotic containing foods. If that's not realistic, you're not going to make your own sauerkraut and go to that kind of, or buy it because it's really expensive or whatever, then you should be on some kind of a probiotic, not all the time, but periodically, throughout time. And then on the other side, the deficiencies that I see in almost everybody that we screen carefully would be for minerals, antioxidants sometimes, but not as often. So minerals like magnesium and zinc, we see deficiencies in minerals with almost everyone that we work with. So that's kind of you should cover your base on that, right? Some kind of liver support, some kind of GI support, usually some kind of probiotic, and then minerals are almost always deficient. All right, so let me grab the questions that are starting to flow in here, and we'll see which ones I can answer. Wondering about sleep stages and patterns. I think I actually kind of covered that a little bit. I think the main thing with sleep, if you don't want to do the crazy thing, is just to go to bed to as close to 9 o'clock p.m. as you can. Okay? If you can just ratchet things down and go to bed as close to 9 p.m. whenever you end up waking up, that I think is a key. Going to bed later than that is going to be problematic for most people. Headaches triggered by light. That's a classic adrenal symptom, is the inability for the body to close the pupils quickly enough. So you might think about adrenals. And there's a really wonderful book. It's called Adrenal Fatigue. And there's a wonderful book about that. And he talks about that in the book, I think. Best way to detox. So I just bought a infrared sauna maybe a year and a half ago. I use it every day. 20 to 40 minutes. It's the best thing I've ever bought. It was kind of expensive. It was like $3,000. They have cheap ones you can buy on Amazon for $1,000. I guess they're probably okay. Seemed a little dicey to buy a really cheap one just because of the EMFs and stuff like that. So I splurged. I've already got my money's worth out of it. I use it, like I said, every day, 20 to 40 minutes. Sometimes if I'm really obsessive, I'll use it twice a day. I feel so much better every time I get out of that sauna. And I think it's the most efficient way to detox. Just pulls everything out. And the one that I bought is small. It's a one-person unit, so it's the size of a small telephone booth. I have it stuck in the corner of my meditation room. Doesn't take up a lot of space at all. And doesn't take up a lot of electricity. It's infrared, and I just love the thing. As a matter of fact, as soon as I'm done with this talk, I'll be using it. I'll pretty much use it every day. Is fasting safe for various health conditions? So fasting is very difficult. Fasting can be one of the most healing and beneficial things that you can do, but you really need to do it under the supervision of someone who knows how to fast. If you want to fast, do not see me as a patient, because I'm not the kind of doctor that knows how to fast people appropriately. I just know that it's a super important thing. You want to find someone who's that's an area of specialty, because you can do all kinds of amazing and wonderful things with fasting, and you can cause a lot of damage. So I highly encourage it, but you need to find a doctor, but don't come to me because I don't know how to do it very well. You want to find a doctor, whatever your problem is, that does that specific thing every day, okay? Questions about insulin assays. What criteria do you use to decide if it was a necessary test? So insulin is sort of a basic lab that, a lot of functional medicine doctors run right away. I have a personal obsession right now in the lab testing world with what's called the ION panel. I can show you guys this real quick here. And maybe just pull it up on the website. So about 2 years ago, I started a training program myself where I'm the student, not the teacher. I also teach doctors in my regular classes, but I started a training program with a man named Richard Lord. So Richard Lord is the doctor that developed organic acids testing, the GI-FX test. He's the scientist behind much of what is used in functional medicine practices now. He had been retired for a while. I dragged him out of retirement, and I work with him now every Monday. And his life's work was basically the ION panel. And so he's been training me in how to use this test appropriately, and I'll just show you what it includes. It's pretty amazing. So, oh wait, that's going to be hard to read. Let me pull one up here. So it stands for, I think, individualized optimized nutrition or something like that. Let me see if I have a sample one. You think they would have it right on here. Let me see. Sorry, I wasn't planning. Oh, here we go, sample report. So this is like the creme de la creme of, it's run by Genova Labs, okay? And it's called an ION panel. It involves a blood draw and a urine sample. And the test includes amino acids, the life building blocks of life, right? Amino acids doesn't get more important than amino acids. And they break them all down. It's pretty cool. Just for that part of the test, it's a pretty cool test. It includes homocysteine, important for all kinds of inflammatory cardiovascular type issues. It does nutrients and toxic elements. So that's the good stuff and the bad stuff. The good stuff being the magnesium and the calcium and the zinc. The bad stuff being the arsenic and cadmium and lead and mercury. Checks all those in whole blood. It looks at CoQ10 levels and a variety of different really powerful antioxidants, including some famous things you may have heard of, like lipid peroxides and whatnot. It looks to see if your DNA is being damaged or not. That's pretty important. You don't want your DNA damaged. It can lead to problems. It checks for vitamin D. And then it has this whole extensive fatty acids section. And I'm not going to pretend to understand this. I basically spend my Mondays going over these labs with Richard Lord because this is really, really complicated. There's so many details involved in this. It is just mind-numbing. But I'm learning how to do it now. And I have the teacher that developed this test. Now, organic acids, I'm really comfortable with. The essential component of this test is organic acids. And I do these a lot on my patients, and I'm already pretty good at doing these. So that's looking at fat burning, carb burning, energy production, B vitamin markers, methylation, very important. Most of you have heard of methylation. It checks for neurotransmitters, oxidative damage, and then detox pathways. And then it has a section on GI. So that's a really, really important test. And they give you this kind of summary here about all your different body systems. And to respond to that question about insulin, they have a whole section here that's looking at metabolic syndrome. But it's not just looking at insulin as a single marker. It's looking at all the factors that relate to metabolic syndrome or syndrome X or problems with blood sugar, everything from the fatty acids to the minerals, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So that's kind of and it's not even that expensive a test. The Genova knocked the price down on this thing. The cash price is like, I think, $500, $600. It's not that much for the amount of information you're getting. It's really a deal. Next question. Oh, on the oat, very high beta hydroxybutyrate. Let me show you here. As a matter of fact, I just had that up, so let's go right back there. Where'd my ION panel go? Here it is. So the question that just came in is around hydroxybutyrate. And let me show you where that is on here. So beta hydroxybutyrate, right here. If that number is extraordinarily high, can mean a couple different things. It can happen if you cut out starchy carbohydrate, in which case it's a normal finding. It's not like there's anything wrong. So if you're on a super low starchy carb diet, low grain diet, that'll shoot up. How do we determine what someone can and cannot eat? Well, it depends on how sick you are. If you're not sick at all, then I would try to figure out what's the smallest amount of animal protein you need to feel good. And I would figure out what's the smallest amount of animal fat you need to feel good. And then have the rest of your diet coming from proteins from plants, right? Vegetables, fruit. The proteins from plants are known as beans, nuts, and seeds. And believe it or not, there's even protein in potatoes. So there's a fair amount of protein you can get from the animal world, but you can get equally good quality protein from plants. That's where the animals get their protein from in the first place, right? So my question is, if you're already super healthy and you're not fighting some chronic illness, then just see what's the smallest amount of animal protein you can get away with. If you're wondering what I do right now is I eat very strict whole foods, plant-based, like Monday through Thursday, sometimes Sunday through Thursday, 4 or 5 days a week. I'm really pretty strict. I don't have any animal fat. I have very little fat at all. And I have lots of fruits, vegetables, beans, potatoes, grains, all that. And then Friday, Saturday, and Sunday is my variable day. Friday and Saturday, I usually have almost always, well, not usually, yeah, probably 3/4 of the time I'll have animal protein, okay? Let's see, another question here. Do you have any anti-inflammatory diet recommendations for inflammatory osteoarthritis? Um, I think one of the more powerful things you can do, and I mean, you can certainly do it with food. So you would want to cut out, again, as I was just saying, you would want to go as much as you can whole foods, plant-based, if you're dealing with a really strong inflammatory problem. If the grains make you worse and the beans make you worse, then you can't do it. You got to flip and you got to go do more of a meat-based diet. But I would try the plant-based first if you can, because the best way to get the anti-inflammatory effect is with the plants. But not everybody can digest the plants, right, if your gut is really messed up. So then the other option that's really potent and totally safe for most people to take is turmeric. That can be a really effective way to get inflammation down in the body. I see really amazing things with turmeric and ginger, those two things. Let's see. Magnesium oil. I just use regular magnesium in a powder or in a pill. I don't know much about magnesium oil. Some people use liquid magnesium, but I don't know much about it in the oil form. How do you protect your face when you use the sauna? I don't, I do like a skin rub thing where I rub all the skin off everywhere, and I don't know, somehow that works for me. It's a little strange, but it seems to work. And then, is there a relationship between hormone levels, estrogen, testosterone, etc., and cognitive decline? I think the research now, and there's a man who's really kind of leading the charge. You guys should know about it if you don't know about him already. Let me pull it up here. He's an incredible scientist and physician. His name is Dale Bredesen. And it's really quite a remarkable human being. I've heard him speak many times. And I know a large handful of doctors that have gone through his training program and really like it. So here he is, the Bredesen Protocol, Dale Bredesen. He's sort of the master of cognitive decline right now, really understands how this works. And they're getting incredible results working with people. Here's his paper on prionic loops, antiprions, etc. And they're really focusing on the inflammatory response and how that leads to cognitive decline. And this group of doctors, I know several of them really well. I'm not friends with Dr. Bredesen, but a couple of his senior students are I'm pretty close with, and they're really, really onto something here, and getting results that I would have thought were, close to impossible. He's also a very interesting person, and his background is quite remarkable, especially if you're into academics. So he graduated from Caltech, and my son is a physics major now in college, and we went to visit Caltech. Caltech is a really big deal. Just getting into Caltech, very few human beings are that smart, right? It's sort of like MIT on steroids, And so clearly he's got, the intelligence level a very rare human being. And then he's decided, you know, after he got his medical degree and had his more conventional medical career, he decided to really launch into looking at what leads to cognitive decline. So his group is really wonderful. He's also at the Buck Institute, the head of the Buck Institute, which is a very interesting organization. So you guys don't know about Dr. Bredesen, you should check him out. He's a really smart guy. Let me see if there are any other questions coming in. Questions about pain. So let me show you my favorite pain solution. And we'll wrap up in a couple minutes, okay? Just got one or two more questions that have come in. So this fellow is a good friend of mine. So if you have musculoskeletal pain, back pain, neck pain, things like this, it's a really wonderful exercise program that's been created called Foundation Training. He's got books, he's got CDs. Let's find Eric on here. Is he on here? Let's see. Should be. Eric Goodman is the creator of this. Where is Eric? Oh, there he is. That's actually Eric right there, I think. I don't see him on here. Let me find him because you got to see a picture of this guy. He's a character. That is not him. That's Thor. Oh, there's Eric. That's Thor. There's Eric right there. So I love this guy. He's an incredible human being. He's got a lot of his best stuff on YouTube for free. So if you're interested in figuring out how to get out of pain, you know, Eric is the least money-oriented human being I've ever met. And he's like, yeah, Dan, I just, you know, put everything that's good on YouTube for free. I want people to learn how to do this stuff. So they're very simple exercises. They're really easy to perform. They look a little dorky, but they work incredibly well, okay? Let's see, a couple more questions here. Oh, liver support. Well, I think there's two things you can do for liver support, and this is non-lab based, okay? So non-lab based, meaning that you don't have to do a fancy lab test. If you want to do a fancy lab test, you know, obviously that's my whole job. You come in, you pay someone like me to do the fancy lab test, and you find out exactly what your liver needs and how messed up it is, and we dial it in perfectly. If you're just doing a generic, I want to take care of my liver kind of thing, then there's two tried and true things you can use. One's called Silymarin, also known as milk thistle. And you can buy it in a liquid form, like in a tincture. You can buy it in a capsule. I think the tinctures are probably better if you can get it. I buy mine at the farmer's market. They just have it right sitting there. I buy my little milk thistle thing every couple weeks. Super, super effective for your liver. And then the other sort of liver powerhouse is N-acetylcysteine, or NAC. Some people call it NAC. N-acetylcysteine, how much should you take? I don't know. I'd say, you know, around 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams a day is probably about right. I don't think any harm could come from anyone from taking these two things. They've both been around forever, and they both can be really supportive for your liver. If you had any side effects from taking either of them, you just stop right away because something's probably seriously wrong. Then you should go see a doctor for sure. Let's see. Oh, can you talk about soy? So there's nothing more controversial in the food world than soy. You got, if you just say the word soy in a group of integrative medical doctors or integrative physicians or chiropractors or naturopaths, you know, half the room's going to be running to take the soy and throw it at the other half of the room who's trying to run and get the soy and eat it, okay? So there are huge advantages and huge disadvantages to soy. The disadvantage to soy, which I think we would all agree with, is if you eat massive amounts of soy, you're going to have a problem, especially if it's processed soy. It's like soy that's a filler in foods, soy that's a protein powder, soy that's in a protein bar, not so good. If you eat soy in its whole form as a whole food, either as soybeans or as tofu or tempeh or something like that, then it becomes a question of how much can you eat. If you've ever been to a Japanese restaurant, get your miso soup, which is made from soy, right? And you'll get like a little piece of tofu, little pieces of tofu in there. They're not eating like tofu burgers in Japan. They're eating small amounts of soy. And for most people, that can be really healthy. It can help prevent all kinds of cancer. It's a really good food. If you're ODing on soy, I've seen people OD on soy before and just eat too much of it, and that can be a pretty big problem, okay? Is NAC a natural product? I mean, it's a supplement, so it's like chemically derived If you want to stay with natural, do the silymarin because that's just a plant that they throw in a bottle. Let's see. Another question. Holistic psychiatrists. Yeah, there's a lot of really good holistic psychiatrists out there. I'll just name a few that I know well. And then if these don't work, then perhaps, you could find someone, that they could refer you to. So there's Kat Topes, who is, you couldn't get a better psychiatrist than Kat. There's another close friend of mine who I've known for many, many years, who's equally good. I couldn't even pick between these two. These would be like choosing between Rocky Road ice cream and butter pecan ice cream. I just couldn't even choose. This is the two of the best. Carol Banyas, equally amazing integrative psychiatrist. Carol Banyas, Banyas, and Kat Topes, two incredible women and two incredible psychiatrists. They're both really great people as well. Oh, here. So Tracy's asking to go. Oh, and someone just mentioned Kelly Brogan. Kelly Brogan's awesome. Let's see. Go back to my chart. Wow, we got a lot of files open here. Okay, let me show you here. I'll talk about this chart for a second since someone's curious about it. So in functional medicine, we're trying to do 4 different things simultaneously. We're trying to figure out the underlying cause, treat physiological damage, fix the body systems, and handle your symptoms all at the same time. A good functional medicine doctor can move between these in different ways, okay? So in other words, they can relieve symptoms but find the underlying cause. And sequencing this is a really difficult and challenging thing. Many times, once you know what the underlying cause is, you don't treat it right away. You have to set the person up for success so you can do that gradually, okay? Why is it so hard to find functional medicine docs on the East Coast? Just because everybody that's cool lives in California, Nevada, and Oregon. No, I'm kidding. There's just too many people. There's so many people, and there's not enough functional medicine doctors that are trained. But, go to the IFM website and check it out. There's, another 1,000 functional medicine doctors getting trained and certified, every year. So, that's a doable thing to do, to figure out. Go to the Institute for Functional Medicine, find a doctor in your area. If you want to work with me, I work with people over the phone, so you can work with me wherever you are. More question. Oh, oils. So one of my favorite doctors, I love this guy. I just love this guy. And I've interviewed him a couple times now. He is just the coolest doctor. And there's a documentary made about him, right? It's called Forks Over Knives. And it's just a wonderful film. It's on Netflix. You can watch it for free on Netflix. Where's Dr. Esselstyn? Oh, they don't have a picture of Esselstyn in here. He's the most humble man. Let me find him for you. I'm just laughing because he's just like the sweetest guy in the whole world. And he's not a schlep, right? I mean, he was, in practice for decades at the Cleveland Clinic, which is, arguably one of probably the top medical facilities in the world. The Mayo Clinic doctors might say they're top, but it's in the top 3 anyways. Here he is. He's a wonderful guy. So Caldwell Esselstyn. He's a character. He's a very interesting man. He's got a really interesting history, and so he's in Dr. Esselstyn's world, where he works with people who have had a heart attack but survived. He puts people on 0 oil diets. So no olive oil, no coconut oil, no fish oil, no oil at all. Now you got to realize this is a way to treat people who have already had a heart attack and who don't want to drop dead from another heart attack. For a healthy person, you can eat oils, obviously. But if you're interested in the no oils approach, he's the man to look up and read about, and he's got a lot of science behind what he does. Now remember, it's just like to the beginning of this conversation, not everybody needs to stop all oils, but if you just almost drop dead of a heart attack and your arteries are blocked, you should seriously consider doing something like Esselstyn's diet. Does that mean that I do that? Absolutely not. I eat oils all the time and I can get away with it. I don't eat oils every day though, There's whole days when I go without any fat, and I lean out and I feel great, for doing that. So there's different, sort of different versions of this. Anyways, he's a very interesting man. His family's been in New York State since the 1600s. Is that even possible? Well, yeah, I guess it is. You think about it. There were people that were coming over from Europe around the 1600s. Very, very interesting doctor and just the sweetest guy. And Forks Over Knives is really worth watching too, especially since it's on Netflix. I'm a real Netflix fan. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up for tonight. I hope you guys enjoyed the talk. I'm glad everyone joined. I'll be doing something patient-oriented, every month or two, so you can keep a lookout for the next topics coming up. I'm doing a lot of teaching right now and traveling, so my schedule's a little tight, but I'm going to hope to join you all in another conversation soon. Okay, have a good rest of your evening. Bye for now.